Hi, my name is Herbie Hancock, and this is Rock School. Rock School is the 8-part series that shows you how blues, heavy metal, funk, reggae, and new music are made and played. This show is about how to get more out of doing less. It's on basic technique. Whether you want to be a great musician, a great singer, or even a great lover, first you got to master basic technique. I remember when I was starting out on keyboards, I'd play for a half hour, maybe an hour, and my fingers would start hurting. That was no fun, especially when I had about an hour or so to practice. The minute you get tired, and unless you really enjoy pain, you stop enjoying what you're doing, and more than likely, so does your audience. On the other hand, proper technique can allow you to get more power with less strain. Then, and only then, can you really get the full enjoyment out of your own performance. Today, you'll hear from some of the people who have mastered basic technique, including John Taylor of Duran Duran, who talks about playing with a plectrum. That's a pick in our language. John Entwistle of The Who, bass innovator Larry Graham with a super demonstration, plus words of wisdom from Robbie Shakespeare, producers Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers, and tying it all together, the sensational Rock School band. Carl Palmer gets the ball rolling right about now.
I always think of the bass player playing right on the note. And I like to think of the drummer playing just in front of that, just to keep pushing it, just to keep the intensity there. And I always think of solo players, or solo instruments, melodic instruments, playing lead lines, or singers being the other side, behind the bass player. So there you have it covered. You have sort of your voice or your lead instrument sort of like giving the emotion, and they need a bit more space to get the emotion. You have the very methodic sort of bass sort of plodding away. Then on top of that, you have the excitement coming from the edge, you know, pushing it on, motoring it on as much as coming from the drummer.
Carl Palmer was talking about something of vital importance to anybody who's played in a band. The way the instruments fit together rhythmically.
Rhythm is obviously a vital part of rock music, but it's not just a matter of how fast or how slow you play. What you play on the drums will affect what the other instruments play, and this in turn affects the structure and arrangement of the whole of the music.
When you get into a band, you not only have to think about what to play, but when to play, because often what you don't play can be as important as what you do. But first of all, we're going to look at how to play, basic technique. Let's start with the drums.
Now, the sitting position. It's very important that you don't lean too far forward, don't lean too far backwards. It may sound obvious, but your weight must go straight down through the stool. This way, it leaves your arms, and in particular your legs, free and loose to play. Now then, starting with the right leg and the bass drum. First of all, the heel planted firmly on the base of the plate down here, and the fulcrum is at the ankle. You can play like this. Most rock drummers, however, lift the heel off the plate a bit to get more power, brings the whole leg into play. Don't come too far off the plate though. Do you get this? And for maximum power, you just bring it halfway down the pedal. Give it some real power. Now then, the third method is to combine those two together. It's quite useful for certain boogie type things, like this one for instance. You get a sort of a rocking motion. The hi-hat, same sort of thing. You don't need as much power, of course, but you still can lift the heels off to get a nice balance between the 2 feet. Alternatively, you can rock it the same as the right foot. Onto the hands. 2 basic grips. First of all, the match grip, which is what most rock drummers use. In this one, the fulcrum is between the fleshy part of the thumb and the first joint here of the first finger. The other fingers wrap around the base. The stick is like an extension of the forearm, the palm face downwards. The stroke comes from a combination of fingers and the wrist, and for maximum power, the whole arm comes in. Now, the other grip is the traditional or orthodox grip. Now, in this one, this was developed by marching band drummers who tended to have the snare drum slung to one side. So they had to develop this rather unorthodox technique where the fulcrum is at the base of the thumb here, the other fingers wrap round again, and the stick goes between the second and the third finger like this. And you get a sort of a cross here between the thumb and the first joint. Now in this one, you want to turn the whole forearm so that you're going up and down in a vertical plane, in this plane. If the wrist turns this time, you get this sort of thing, which is exactly what you don't want. This is the orthodox grip, but it's still used by some of the world's most powerful drummers. So even though rock drummers tend to use this one, we asked Ian Pace and Carl Palmer what they thought about the grips.
I would say to anybody starting off that the match grip, which I think so many, well, maybe 95% of the rock drummers today play like this. I personally think this is a better way to play, mainly because the whole of the percussion family uses this particular grip. Timpani, vibraphone, glockenspiel, even tubular bells, you're playing that way.
When you consider that the orthodox grip only came through the fact that it was a military style for a man marching with a snare drum angled across his leg. I mean, it was impossible to play it like that, really. So that's they developed that style. On a modern drum kit, you don't actually set the drum like that. So what's the point in using it?
One thing you do have from this particular grip is there's a little bit of finger control which goes in there, which, you know, you can get this way, but I think there's a little more. There's some very well-known drummers who have actually made a lifetime sort of style out of like this finger technique.
But that's not the only thing that you can do on rock drums. Listen to this. Right, that was a selection of straight-ahead rock fills. Did you also know that they can be played separately as technical exercises called rudiments? Now then, very briefly, I played flams, 3 strokes, 4 strokes, and they're based on the primary rudiment, which is the single stroke roll. This is played simply like this, one hand after the other. The next one, double stroke roll, 2 beats on each hand, like this. If I mix the singles and doubles together, you probably hear the difference a bit better, like this, say. And so on. Now then, in fact, there are 26 standard rudiments and thousands of variations on them. You can find them in loads of drum tutors. It may sound a bit dry, but it's a bit like Deirdre and her guitar, say. Sometimes she might have to look in a book to find different chords, different scales she'd never think of for herself. Same thing can apply to the drums. Okay, for instance, to take the next important rudiment, the famous paradiddle. Now this one you probably wouldn't think of for yourself, but it's very important because it mixes singles with doubles in the closest possible pattern, in this fashion. And that's just left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, and so on. Now then, we asked Carl Palmer and Ian Pace to show us just what you can do with a simple pattern like that.
A couple of simple, for instances, with a paradiddle. One is just using a straight 4/4 tempo between, and putting the paradiddle between the bass drum and the snare drum. If you take a paradiddle being right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. So you take that between the snare drum and the bass drum, you get. You immediately have a rhythm, a patterned rhythm. Now, if you don't know a paradiddle, you've never worked that out in a million years. But it's so simple to do. You take the same thing, you can have an interesting paradiddle pattern between the bell of a cymbal and your snare drum. You take it up in tempo and get the impression of a train going along. It's a movement, you know, you get. You can do that all day long, and it's really impressive if you stick it in the right place. But if you don't know the notation of a paradiddle, then that's something you'd never actually work out by yourself.
If you play them slow or fast, there's a great difference in the sound. You know, the actual feeling in your hands is the same as the sound. You couldn't actually tell I was doing two with one or one with the other, you know, to the listener. And that's the object of them, really, to get each beat as even as possible. And then you can take that same thing and put it on the drum set. You can actually play paradiddles on the drum set, and they would sound, they'd sound like this.
Moving on now to the bass and guitar, we're going to look at left and right hand techniques. These are probably even more important for shaping your sound than either the instrument or the amp that you're using.
Now on bass guitar, the right hand is probably most important for shaping your sound. Let's look at the classic playing position. The thumb is on the back pickup and the weight is actually balanced on the back of the bass. So your thumb firmly in position and then you use your first and second finger to play on the strings like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now you'll notice that the strings are ringing and you have to stop that, so you bring in your left hand. The left hand controls the unwanted noise. So this time, damping goes like this. 1, 2. Notice how I bring my hand round as I move across the strings. Can you see that? Now, without even altering your amp or your pickup selection, you can get a wide variety of tones. All you have to do is move your fingers and play on different parts of the string. At the back, you get a hard, biting tone, like this. In the middle, you get a really punchy sound. And at the front of the bass, you get a real bassy sound. Now, as an alternative to those ways of playing, you can use a plectrum as a guitar player would do. That is absolutely fantastic for sort of boogie, hard driving rhythms. Sounds like this. Now, there are probably as many different right-hand styles as there are bass players, so we went out and asked a few how they did it. Notice the variety of different tones they managed to get, purely by the way they attacked the note.
I never intended to play with the plectrum, apart from, as he picks up his Duran Duran plectrum. The first single was Planet Earth, which was just, what is it? I'll do that again. And I simply just couldn't play that, you know, at that pace with my fingers, at least not yet anyway. And apart from that, it was the only time I ever used a plectrum. It's not snobbery or anything, it suits some players. You know, I saw Thin Lizzy the other night, and I mean, it would just not work in a band like Thin Lizzy, you know, with a finger style. But I felt for us, I wanted a very... I don't like the actual click that you get on the strings when it takes away from the actual note itself. At least when you hit a... all you get is the bass note. You know, you don't get any percussion sound off your fingers.
Well, this finger, like, can't get that sound from that note. Can't get it heavier. Can't get it lighter. Can't get it much deader. You know, same note.
Do you use your thumb?
Yeah, depends on the sound. Like the thumb, if I want like a dead sound, right? And if I want just like if I want a deep note, a lighter note, right? So, you know, it just depends on how I move my hand.
I find my right hand changes position at least probably about 10 times during a song, just to get different effects and different sort of playing styles.
bass, then a lot of the sound comes from the right hand. With the guitar, though the right hand is very important, it's often the left hand that does most to control the sound. So we talked to some guitarists about their left-hand styles.
When you're playing the chord, you don't actually press the strings firmly onto the fretboard as to cause a sound that will, you know, you'll hear every note in the chord, like, you wouldn't, you know, hear that. You'd hold that chord by just resting your hand above, you know, the position of that chord and just hitting it. So it sounds, you know, well, you can still make out that there's a chord there, but it's being muffled.
The way I like to hear a guitar is as part of a group, as part of a rhythm thing, and I think the guitar can emphasise and enhance things in a lot of the ways that a drummer can. I mean, this way of playing is very percussive, so that instead of just chords like that, the whole thing is like is cutting them off nice and snappy, so that you hit a chord, and then if you just lift your fingers so that they dampen the strings instead of making the notes, you get that. So you can vary between chords that are held on for a while or immediately stop like that to give it emphasis.
So let's look now at the guitar right hand, and first of all at Plectrum Technique. The usual way of holding the plectrum is between the thumb and the first finger. You can use either downstrokes like this, or upstrokes. But the most effective way of building up your speed is to use alternate up and down strokes like this. Now, I was keeping my wrist quite relaxed, and most of the movement was coming just from the wrist. If I was playing chords, I'd probably rotate the wrist and forearm as well. The thing to remember not to do is to tense your wrist up and move from the elbow like that. This is a way of slowing you down, and also you won't be able to get such a smooth plectrum technique. Now, you can also use the plectrum to control the volume, simply by deciding how hard to strike the strings, something like this. The last right-hand technique I'm going to look at is damping. To dampen the strings with the right hand, put the side of the hand just on the bridge saddles like that. This leaves your fingers free to pick the strings still, and you can use this technique either to get quite a chunky chord sound like this, or if you want to play single notes and get quite a percussive sound, something like this. So you can see that right-hand damping is important in all styles of music.
But let's return to the point raised by Carl Palmer at the beginning of the programme. How do the instruments in your band fit together rhythmically? We'll start with the drums, the most obvious rhythm instrument. Right, well, the main job of the drums, obviously, is to state the rhythm of the song. And a rhythm we define as a regularly repeated pattern in time. In music, time is divided into units called bars, and in rock, most bars are divided into pulses, 4 pulses, called beats, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Bar 1,
2, 3, 4.
bar 2,
2, 3, 4.
bar 3,
2, 3, 4.
bar 4.
2, 3, 4.
A bar, an even amount of time, split into 4 even pulses called quarter beats. You can take that same bar and split it into 8 even sections. It would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can split your bar into 2, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we've got a rock beat. Let's add the band to that.
Right, I'm sure you all recognise that as a bow diddley rhythm, but in fact it comes from the Cuban clave rhythm, which is a pattern that crops up all over the place in rock. Now, so far we've been talking in 2s, 4s and 8s, but the first measure of the clave rhythm is an odd pattern. and the accents fall on the 1st, 4th and 7th of my hi-hat 8th beats, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, these odd accents are called syncopations, and it's syncopation that can really make a rhythm drive. The other half of the clave pattern is an even pattern, which seems to answer the instability set up by the first half. Now, this question and answer, call and response, is a common feature in all of rock music, and we'll come back to it again and again in this series.
Now, when it comes to playing together as a band, one idea might be for the bass and the guitar to fit in with the rhythm that's being laid down by the drums. Perhaps the bass can fit in really tight with the bass drum, like this.
While the guitar could match the snare pattern like this. Or I could switch and match the hi-hat pattern, something like this.
To add colour, if the drums does a fill or plays an accent, it sounds great for the guitar and the bass to go with it. Something like this. But whatever the style of music, there's a rule of thumb that applies to all of them. We asked Larry Graham to explain for us.
Well, actually, it depends. It depends on how complicated you're trying to get. If you're really trying to keep it simple, okay, then if the guitarist is playing a real complicated pattern, then I look for simplicity, okay? And another thing that's really important too, I must say, if there's a vocal involved, then we both should be pretty simple and let the vocal stand out in front until we go to the bridge or until somebody starts to take a solo, then we can stretch out, so to speak. But basically, if he's playing a complicated riff, say like in the key of E, I'd find something pretty simple, like play a riff in the key of E, Tony. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like a simple. So I found the simplest thing I could find to lock that down right there. See, then if the drums would have came in, the drums, pop, 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 right there. See, so really, since he's starting now, by the same token, if I started something real complicated, then he'd try to find something simple to play. You know, maybe well. So I took the lead that time, see, and we just kind of like traded roles.
It sounds obvious, doesn't it? But getting your band to mesh together is really a matter of trial and error and practice. It might help to think of yourselves as a team. Even though you might be the best player, it won't necessarily make a good team. Let's look now at the way that Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards organise things in Chic.
You got to complement each other. I mean, if you're going to go in, you can create things where you're fighting each other or you go against the groove or things like that for a moment. But for the basic dance thing or listening, it sounds better when everything kind of sounds like it's flowing along together.
I guess that's why they call it a rhythm section. It's basically four people playing together to make a rhythm pattern that sounds like one overall rhythm pattern instead of four distinctly different patterns.
I had the good fortune to have worked with Nile Rodgers on the Mick Jagger solo album, and I don't mind admitting that I learned a thing or two from the man. Now don't go away, because the Rock School Band is coming back right after I remind you serious students out there that in a moment you'll get information on the Rock School Home Study Package. It goes into much greater detail than a half-hour TV program possibly can. Now for rock school, this is Herbie Hancock saying,